All right. Good morning, everybody. My name is Dr. Nigam. I work for the Clay County Hospital. I'm a hospitalist and an ER physician. I also see patients afflicted with sleep disorders, conduct sleep studies here as well. And one of my passions in medicine is to talk about nutrition and how healthy foods can make a difference in terms of how well we can live and how we can get rid of all the extra medications that we have to take. So today's talk will be themed around the same concept, and it's called, it's a very famous quote by Michael Pollan, who's an activist and a journalist, who has said, eat foods, mostly plants, not too much. So we'll just kind of touch base on this quotation and kind of see how we can integrate it into our day-to-day living. And if you have any questions, please feel free to stop me and ask as you go. So first part of the quote is eat food. So lots of times we are not quite sure if what we are eating is a real food or what we call food-like substance. So they look like food, they probably taste like food, but we don't get the same benefits that we would get out of food in general. So that's why it's called food-like substances and not real food. For instance, real food will come out of the soil and it should get, it should perish after a few days or so. It should not be there forever. It should not have shelf life longer than our lives, because then there's something wrong with the food. So we have to make sure that things perish. That's one of the qualities of foods that bring nutrition to us. So what are these things which mimic like food, but they're not actually foods? One of the big things is supplements. Like we try to enhance our vitamin deficiencies and nutritional deficiencies by taking more supplements. But the question is, if these supplements are really helping us or are they hurting us more as we are taking them? So we'll touch base on the supplements. Also touch base on what we call added sugars or artificial sweeteners and see how they affect our metabolic profile, how they affect our quality of health, how they affect our body mass index or indicators of obesity. And obviously we'll talk a little bit about GMOs or genetically modified foods, which I call grotesquely modified foods because there's something wrong with it as we will see. So just for starters, looking at the picture on the left side versus that on the right side. This is from the movie theaters in 1955 versus what they have become in 2017. What are some of the differences that folks are noticing from the picture on the left compared to that on the right? Skinnier? Okay, that's one main thing. Everybody seems to be skinnier and fitting pretty much within their seats. Anything else?
The left is not eating.
Not eating. There's no food stuff to like stack your food or anything that they're eating. They're just bringing their handbags and stuff like that. Kids are sitting together. Notice there's two kids sitting together in one seat. Like they're so skinny. Like I don't know why they're doing that, but there's two of them sitting together. And now this is how the kids are eating, I guess. In the movie theaters, are watching video games, PlayStation 2 and stuff like that. So a lot has changed in terms of how we are eating at this point, and that has not only the quality of food but also the quantity of food, and how we kind of combine food with every joy and entertainment that comes in our life. So it has become an integral part. This is a graph that shows how drastically what we call body mass index or BMI has gradually gone up. All over the world, obviously, but also in the United States more so. So this is data from 2008, and that is only showing overweight people. That is BMI more than 25. So 25 to 30 is overweight. After 30, we call it obesity. 30, 35, grade 1, 35, 40, grade 2, and then 40 and above, grade 3 or severe obesity. So basically, as you can see, darker the color, the more weight there is, I guess. That's the way it is built. So the darkest colors are, of course, United States and some countries, I think this is Argentina, some countries in South America. But for the most part, Asia and Africa are the lighter colors. That was 2008. Now obviously, this is data looking at obesity, which is BMI more than 30. So now we notice all of our country is kind of turning dark, and so is I think it's the United Arabs or some Middle Eastern countries that are also getting more obese over time. But that is the highest that you can get on this graph, which is 30 and above. So the highest bracket is being occupied by us. Australia comes a second close, but I guess they're trying to catch up with us. I don't know if we'll get close to us. This is again comparative data from the CDC, or the Center of Disease Control. This basically shows how our body mass index has gradually but insidiously gone up all over these years. From 1985, as you can see, less than 10% is what most of our country was. And of course, the white ones are the ones which they could not gather any data. And now it's slowly turning, as you can see, the color migration from light blue to orange to red to dark red. So like the maroon and the red are the most obese states. Illinois, I guess, fares a little better, but as you can see, we live in southern Illinois, which is all around Missouri and Kentucky, which are again the dark red states with highest obesity. And southern U.S. has more incidence of obesity than the northeast or the northwest or the west. So that's another problem. So we'll kind of explore, is it just the food or the kind of food that we're eating? Because the genes haven't changed much. We are still similar to what the genes our ancestors were carrying. So it doesn't make sense that all of a sudden we would start putting on weight and have diabetes and high blood pressure and cholesterol issues and everything. So I think it's a lot to do with the lobbying done by the food industry and the way food is presented to us and marketed to us. So let's start with GMOs. As I said, GMO stands for genetically modified organisms or moronic organisms, because what you're doing basically is doing something which is very unnatural. You splice a gene from a strawberry and you combine it with a gene of a fish. Any two organisms, plants, animals, insect animals. You just cross-combine those genes because, say, the first gene was resistant to certain bacteria or pesticides, and you thought it would be better when you're growing fishes, for instance, let's add that gene to the fish so that they don't get the infections or the infestations from parasites and stuff like that. So that's what genetically modified crops is what they started with, soy, corn, and stuff like that. And today, actually, salmon will be the first genetically modified animal product that will be available in the States in 2 years from now. So they're still kind of in the, I don't know if they're testing actually, because I don't know what phase they are in, but in 2 years it will be available in supermarkets for consumption. And this is a comparison. The one in front is the natural salmon, and the one behind is the bigger version, because we want more meat and stuff like that. So they found a gene that grows bigger, faster, quicker, and gets us the bang for the buck quicker. So this is the genetically modified version, and that's how everything is done. Like, they have to be pesticide resistant, crops have to be drought resistant, bacteria resistant, and stuff like that. So that obviously, as the population of the world is increasing, there's increased demand for food, and so we need to have more food to feed all the people. So that was obviously a pressing need to develop such kind of crops, but then there's a price we pay for these crops and the food products conditions we need. On the left side of the screen is picturized what we call the soil food web, which shows the balance of the ecosystem, the contributions of different animals, insects, birds, nematodes or worms, and the bacteria that grow in the soil. So basically, when the plant dies, it has to be decomposed, it has to be broken down. The insects and these worms, what we call nematodes and the arthropods, they will do the macrofragmentation, breaking down the bigger particles into smaller chunks. And then we need these fungi and bacteria and all these microscopic organisms to act on the fruits, bark, trees, whatever there is, to decompose it into what is the organic matter, the basic nutrients that are logged in the plants. Now, unfortunately, when we try to combine these genes, the plants have lost their natural chromosomal makeup. So all these organisms, which in the process of evolution have just dealt with natural plants and natural animals, are suddenly finding new chromosomes that they don't identify. and they don't have the enzymes to break it down. So they are starving because they can eat that stuff. And the plants are not decomposing very well because the nutrients are not just being released into the soil anymore. So that's why you might have heard of colony collapse for the bees and lots of species being lost in the coral reefs disappearing and stuff like that. One part of it is obviously the plastic that is polluting the oceans and the global warming and stuff like that. But it also has a role to play in terms of loss of the biodiversity or the different kinds of organisms that would have thrived before we had the GM crops introduced and GM animals now. Now this is a very busy slide, but I'll just kind of walk you over the basic components of this slide. So this slide talks about a research study that was conducted in somewhere in China in 2012 at the University of Nanjing somewhere. So basically what they did is a very startling observation that they came to know about, is that they eat a lot of rice in China. And so they did the study where they looked, when people are consuming rice, obviously it's a food, so it has a nutrient value. It has carbohydrates, it has proteins, it has vitamins, nutrients, minerals, stuff like that. Now, when we are consuming rice or any fruit, we are not only consuming the vital elements that are there, we are also consuming the DNA or the genes that are there. Now, the hope is, as they're passing through the gut, all these chromosomes that are logged in the fruits and vegetables, they are being broken down by the enzymes and being absorbed. And so, if it's broken down by the enzymes, the DNA or the deoxyribonucleic acid, it's a nucleic acid, it's being broken down. So the body is kind of just using the uric acid, that's a byproduct, it's excreted in urine and stuff like that. But what they found is that the RNA, which is the messenger molecule for the DNA, there's DNA, which forms the RNA, the messenger molecule, which forms the protein. That's how the body builds proteins and structures and stuff like that. So this RNA from the rice is escaping the gut barrier. So it's escaping the lining of the wall, and it's going and integrating with the cells, what we call the epigenetic effect, which means surrounding genes are going to influence the natural genes that are living in the body. So that's how now it's being implicated that they have a role to play in cancer, Alzheimer's, and diabetes. In this particular instance, the rice gene was affecting the way LDL, or cholesterol, was being metabolized and produced by the liver. So it just shows, comes back to the idea that you are what you eat. What we are eating is what we are going to reap the benefits out of. And if we are going to eat stuff which is hard to be metabolized by the body, has high pesticide load, then it will be harder on our bodies in a few decades, obviously. Any questions about all that stuff? This is another map that basically shows how the GM or the genetically modified labeling is conducted across the world. As you can see, the blue color is where it's banned, like you can't have GM foods there. So it's kind of crazy that some countries in Africa and Europe, I think it's Serbia, and this is Zambia, they have banned, and I don't know what this small country is, but basically they have banned the sale of GM food. So you can't purchase or sell genetically modified foods in those countries. The lighter colors have some restrictions, not many, but you still have to put it on the label that, okay, this much amount of food is genetically modified, what are the main ingredients there. The darker colors, 64 countries in Europe and across the world have made it mandatory that they reveal to the consumers that this food is genetically altered. It's not natural food that grows or even pesticide laden. You have to tell them if it has been genetically modified or altered in some way. 64 countries. That is not applicable for the United States. It's not applicable for Canada even, though Canada has more stringent norms than US in terms of the food guidelines. So as you can see, even the third world countries have some regulation. China has some, India has some. But all this light color, Canada, US, Mexico, and Argentina. Actually, those are the 4 main countries that produce 90% of the soy and corn in the genetically modified foods. So they are the only countries in the world that do not want or do not require mandatory labeling of GM status on the foods. So if I buy an apple from a supermarket, in all these European countries, you have to tell us if it's genetically altered. But in the States, they are not required to. And it's kind of, to me, it's very disturbing and unsettling that we exercise so much freedom of speech and right of knowledge and stuff like that, and the corporate industry has still managed to get with this kind of crime of not telling us what they are feeding us. And the only way to bypass that for now, well, they're trying to introduce it more the people are becoming aware. I guess eventually there will be GM labeling, but still 2017, the rest of the world does it much better than us. It's kind of disturbing. So right now, I told my folks in the last lecture too, the easiest way to do this is when you go to any supermarket, just look at the sticker on the fruit or the vegetable. You'll see there's like, I think it's a 4 or 5 digit numeral thing that starts with either 4 or 8 or 9. And the best way to remember is if that sticker labeling starts say 4357. If the first numeral is 4, it's conventional, which means it may or may not have, well, if it's labeled 4, then it means it's conventional. It probably has some pesticide burden, the things that they are herbicides, pesticides to kill these bugs. If it starts with 8 is engineered, which is genetically engineered or genetically modified. So that food is probably the one that has ingredients from plants, animals, or 10 different organisms put together to combine the chromosomes. So that is probably the one to avoid the most, if we are fortunate. And most places have stickers, so I think they do provide us that information. So what is the best one? The best one is one that starts with 9. So whenever you go to the organic section, they will just have 9s. 9, 8, 2, 3, 9, 4, 7, 8. So when it starts with letter 9, 9 is organic. N and 9, organic. So 4 is conventional, 8 is engineered or GMO, 9 is engineered. So, I'm sorry, 9 is organic. So the best way to kind of make the distinction right now until they make it mandatory labeling saying GM food is to just go by the number system, and I think that's the best we can do. But obviously things are changing and people are becoming more aware, so hopefully stricter regulations will come in the future.
So what about 4 again?
Corn?
4.
4 is conventional, so it means that we do not know 100%. It doesn't have genetically modified. All we know is that it's conventional, so it has been sprayed with pesticides and herbicides. So there is that glyphosate and other chemicals that are being carried. So for that reason, it's probably not the best, but if there was a choice between 4 and 8, I would still go with 4. Because when it's 8, obviously it has pesticides added to it because there's super weeds and stuff like that, so you need that as well.
Where's those numbers? That's those little fine numbers you see on the bottom of the cans and stuff?
You can see it on any fruits and vegetables. It's like the sticker that comes with it, that we remove it. So the sticker has 4 or 5 numbers.
Oh, okay.
So 4, 5, 6, 8.
It's the canned good, it's the fresh foods and everything.
Only the fresh fruits and vegetables.
Oh, only
all
the
the
fresh.
fresh produce.
Okay.
So the sticker we throw away before eating the fruit or vegetable. That's on any broccoli, apple, pear, anything like that. So quickly to wrap up, the effects of GMO. What are the main problems? First problem is we are playing God. This is a dangerous territory we are entering. We haven't done this before, and now we are trying to change the chromosomal structure of plants and animals. Obviously, we are not strong enough or powerful enough yet to create new life. All we can do is steal a gene from a strawberry and one from the bee and mix it together and see what's happened. So it's kind of a problem because once you introduce that, this cross transfer is irreversible. That thing is there forever, right? So we do not have a way to dismantle this new hybrid strawberry from the organic natural strawberry. So who knows in the course of evolution which strawberry will persist if it's just allowed to grow wild. So that's the problem, that we cannot control this reaction. It's an uncontrolled, like a nuclear reaction. The other is this very controversial thing about allergens. Lots of people have tried to so-called debunk this theory that GMO foods are non-allergenic. And I do not have a very strong stance on that. All I can tell you is that the information is there. They test the food for certain allergens or proteins. Just like a patch test you get when you go to an allergist and they kind of look for what kind of allergens you are allergic to. So they're testing for these molecules, but the problem is, just like we saw earlier, if we have the DNA integrating or influencing our DNA, the plant DNA introduced into the GM food affecting our DNA, then the protein that is formed later. So it's not a pre-formed, pre-existing protein in the food, but it's formed by influencing the gene once that food is ingested. So for that reason, we will never find the allergen protein in the GM food because it's not there to begin with. It's the way the body processes it after we have ingested that the problem starts. The third one obviously is still in biodiversity. So we do not have those many animals, insects available and alive to kind of break down these GM foods, so they will be dying as well. So we will have loss of biodiversity. The ecosystem will become more fragile. An example is when cotton grows, the cotton bollworms, they had an enzyme to break down the natural toxin in the cotton called gossypol. And now the genetically altered cotton doesn't allow these worms to break it down, so they die. So every plant, every animal, every insect in nature has a role to play in the ecosystem. And when we disrupt it, we might have a price to pay, not today, probably a decade or so later. The human effects, they are very concerning because the GM foods are such a new introduction all through the course of evolution and history of mankind, the hundreds of thousands of years that we have lived here. We haven't had this strange, precarious situation where we have been eating foods that have such a bizarre chromosomal combination. So we don't know what the effects are. There's no long-term studies available yet to tell us whether they're going to cause, we can only speculate, like, does it cause cancer and Alzheimer's and stuff like that they mentioned? But it's too early, and we would not know until like a decade or two later. So that was the section on GM foods. The second thing, which is a food mimicker, is are the NNS, or the non-nutritional sweeteners, the added sugars, the additives, preservatives, and stuff like that. Lots of them are there in the processed foods. So for the sake of simplicity, I'll just call it sweeteners, but lots of them are present in the normal processed foods. Like, you would not think bread has sweeteners, but it does have molecules that will affect the way the normal bread would have been metabolized. Because as you can see, the artificial sweetener industry has made a lot of money, but just by introducing it in different products in the Whole Foods market, the supermarkets, because they increase the shelf life. They're preservatives, additives, fillers, flavors. So they are making the food more palatable and last longer on the shelf. So who doesn't want to have that benefit? Every food maker would like that. Now we have found that 3/4 or 75% of the foods that are available in supermarkets have some additives added. So it's very important to go through the labels and make sure that you don't want a few of them, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But basically, it's very hard to avoid. It's just the way things have evolved over time. And all these foods, granola and yogurt and whole wheat bread, as you can see, all of them have some ingredients which are sweeteners, which make it sweet. We might not feel it's sweet, but still there's sweeteners which are making it sweet. And how did they get introduced? Because of this strong fear that sugar, and of course it does, but sugar is calories, and the more calories you consume, the more problems we have, metabolic problems, weight issues, diabetes, hypertension, stuff like that. So these are non-nutritional sugars. They don't have the carbohydrate or the sugar component, so they are supposed to be safer alternatives to added sugars. That's how the whole thing started. But as you can see, whole wheat bread, this has sucralose, very common. Ketchup has, of course, high fructose corn syrup. This is the one that gets the bad repo, and I think we have avoided it for the most part. Granola again has some natural sugar substitutes, and salad dressing again has saccharin, sucralose, acesulfame. All these molecules are basically non-nutritional sugars. That's the category they classify them into. Again, another correlation graph on the right. It basically shows us how the obesity epidemic, and of course with that the high blood pressure, diabetes, cholesterol issues, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, PCOS or polycystic ovarian syndrome, all of them are related to metabolic derangements. How have they come into play with the introduction of artificial sweeteners, processed foods, and how the market is booming for the, you see this J-shaped curve, like how fast this market is growing in terms of consumption. And this is the curve for obesity, or the BMI greater than 30, that's their cutoff. So since 1960s to 2010, and this doesn't even take 2017, but even till 2010, you see this J-shaped curve, and how this curve is going up. And it's not that we are eating more food, it's just the quality of food that we're eating is not very nutritional, and it has detrimental side effects over long term. Again, in the interest of time, I'll skip this slide, but basically this was a study done looking at artificially sweetened beverages and long-term weight gain, because the most startling thing was, you'll hear lots of women will drink like diet soda. I'm on a diet Coke or diet soda, and gosh, there's like still, we find that they're having lots of difficulties losing weight. What's the reason for that? And this study debunks why that happens. And we'll come to that in a little bit. But just for the molecular structures, anybody interested in chemistry, why are they different than, I see not many enthusiastic people in the crowd. But basically sucrose, this is a normal natural sugar which we have been consuming for thousands of years. This is the natural one. You can always add sugar to your tea or coffee or whatever you're having. Aspartame, saccharin, sucralose, neotame, acesulfame, all these are unnatural sugars which do not have this, the CHO or the carbohydrate hydrogen oxygen structure. So what is different? Let's take a look. This molecule is different. N stands for nitrogen. Sucralose has chloride, and aspartame, neotame, acesulfame, all of them have nitrogen. This one also has sulfur. The problem with this structure is, just like we had a lecture on protein, we talked about why too much of protein is bad. We always ask, like, where do you get your protein from? And we were talking about why too much protein is not a good thing for us, and it causes all sorts of problems, including chronic kidney disease and cancers. But the idea here is nitrogen is very hard for the body to get rid of. When you eat sugar, the byproducts are carbon dioxide and water. Water you can pee out, carbon dioxide you can exhale. Very easy to get rid of. When we load the body with amines or NH2 groups, or nitrogen hydrogen groups, it has to be detoxified in the liver first, what is called deamination. And the liver bears the brunt for that. And then it goes to the kidney where there's the urea cycle. So two cycles, the deamination cycle in the liver, the urea cycle in the kidney, have to work all the time, 24/7, when we take these unnatural sugars or high doses of animal protein, same deal. Because we cannot store proteins in the body. Nitrogen structures have to be eliminated if they're not being used. So that's part of the reason why this study, eventually in 2011, they published a study showing that addition of sugars in artificially sweetened soda leads to albuminuria, which is a condition in which the body loses the albumin. And then we have the swelling of the feet and congestive heart failure and cirrhosis and stuff like that. And kidney failure. So, and it says women, but obviously there's, I don't think a study has been done on men. But more so in women, chronic kidney disease or end-stage renal failure and dialysis risks are increased both with consumption of artificially sweetened soda and all those beverages that contain aspartame, neotame, acesulfame, all those molecules. Or, as well as the risk of course, getting dialysis is increased. The other condition which was very startling, and this is getting a lot of attention, this was published in the journal Stroke, I think it was in April of this year, in 2017, or in May, yeah, it was in May. This is a very eminent journal, and what they found is very startling and disturbing at the same time. It's found that people who consume 2 or more diet soda every day on the average, they are at 2.8 times higher risk of Alzheimer's dementia, and they are 2.9 times at higher risk of strokes. And this was a huge study. This is not like 10 people sitting in a room and discussing, like, shall we just say dementia and stroke? Is that okay with you? This is like 3,000 people who were followed for years to see the outcomes. And the outcomes were seen for ischemic strokes, which are strokes similar to formation of blood clots in the heart. Those are formed in the brain. And obviously, dementia is formation of amyloid plaques. So basically, not only the risk of kidney failure, but more so risk of strokes and dementia with consumption. So there's a huge drastic need to cut back on sweetened beverages, all different kinds, soda pops and stuff like that, as much as we can. Replace it with lemonade, water, anything that's natural is a good option. All right, so next slide is about, this slide shows us, in combination with the SAC cycle of obesity, it shows us why people, if they drink diet soda, which technically has 0 calories, how can you gain weight? It doesn't make sense, defies logic. How would you gain weight by drinking something that has 0 calories? It should not be adding anything. The reason for that is there's 3 components which can contribute to weight loss, contribute to weight gain. They are stress, which is mostly mental stress, and adiposity, which is collection of fat cells, more so centripetal obesity, so collection of fat cells around the waist. That's a good indicator, along with BMI, by the way. So BMI is not absolute. What your waist circumference is, that's considered another good indicator of how the metabolic effects will happen, things like diabetes and high blood pressure. So the visceral adiposity, and the third thing is carb craving, how much you crave carbohydrates, not fats, not proteins, carbohydrates. So what they found, and this was a study done in rats, they found that because the artificial sweeteners are like 20 times sweeter than the natural sugar, the brain perceives it differently. It's like, it's creating high, but you're not getting the satiation or the fulfillment that you get from the sugar. Obviously it's sweet, but since you're not getting it, you're always in a constant craving mode, like, give me more, something more. And there's no satiation, which brings eating to an end, or satiety, which is eating between meals. Like, even after we had our lunch, we're like, okay, let's grab an ice cream or something. So why does that happen? And that is because the dopamine centers in the brain are so messed up with the artificial sweeteners, which are 20 times. So even the sweet doesn't seem sweet anymore, because the normal sugar doesn't seem to do it for us. So it's these cravings, and the study found that more people who have the visceral adiposity, the more the vicious cycle, the more the craving there will be. So it's not that we are hungry all the time, but we haven't been getting the fulfillment from eating the food, which was earlier supposed to be bringing feeling of fulfillment. So this cycle has to be broken to overcome obesity. And with obesity, I mean metabolic syndrome, diabetes, high blood pressure, cholesterol issues, all those things go together. So look at what they say, and this is such a startling revelation. This study says, do they cause weight gain? So they say, no. American Heart Association, American Diabetes Association, they say it does not cause weight gain, and that's true. It does not cause weight gain in itself. It causes weight gain when we combine it with our natural eating instincts. So it says, the evidence review suggests that when used judiciously, the non-nutritional sugars could facilitate reductions in added sugar, which is a good thing, and resulting decrease in total energy and weight loss. However, these will not be realized if there is a compensatory increase in energy intake. So we already saw, the cycle tells us that the moment you have these carb cravings and you eat these sugars, and if you have visceral adiposity and the stress created by hunger or just the eating stress, we will end up here. So there's no way to try one and not have the other two come with it. So that's true. If we just eat soda, like diet soda, and not eat anything for the rest of the day, probably will lose weight. I don't know if it's a healthy way, what will happen from there. But it makes you almost wonder if we are yogis sitting in a Texas steakhouse. We're like, okay, we'll see the steak, but we'll not eat it. There's no way to not have the craving when you're consuming that stuff. So it's kind of a oxymoronic statement to be expecting that. But it's kind of true that in itself, probably they do not cause weight gain. It's the craving to have more in between meals and stuff like that that makes it worse. Now, I'll ruin it for you more, because that's what I'm here for today, I guess. So, what about the popcorns? Everybody's favorite. Popcorns have one problem. Of course, if you pop your own corn, there's no problem. Everything is more with this food industry and the way they package foods and they increase the flavors and stuff like that. So, we have found, and this is a very recent study too, 2012, there is formation of what we call beta amyloid plaques. And amyloid is essentially a congregation of molecules that cannot be broken down, and they're collecting in different organs, heart, brain, stuff like that. And when they collect in the brain, the most obvious thing that happens is Alzheimer's. So lots of people are getting forgetfulness, dementia. Alzheimer's should be mostly in their 80s and 90s and stuff like that. But we are seeing more and more problems with dementia and multi-infarct dementia or stroke-related dementias in earlier ages. And part of the reason for that is this ingredient that adds a buttery texture and flavor to the popcorn called diacetyl. So the only way to bypass that is to make your own popcorn. MSGs, most people are kind of aware of it, especially if you have migraines, you try to avoid the monosodium glutamate or the MSG components, mostly in Chinese foods and noodles and stuff like that. Soy, the soy sauce in Chinese restaurants probably have a lot of MSGs. So that has, it's a neurotoxic substance that kills the brain cells, so that's why the cells will die, and there's other issues with that. So to sum up, there's lots of issues with artificial sweeteners, in my opinion, more than what the GM foods are causing damage to. But the artificial sweeteners, one of the biggest problems is the cravings they create, the sense of not having the fulfillment of the food that we usually would have, that makes us go for more foods in between meals, with the meals. And once the centripetal obesity kicks in, there's hard for us to stop the cravings, essentially. So it just gets getting worse. And they alter the taste bud receptors. So the way the taste buds were perceiving sugars, they're not perceiving it anymore, and we require more and more to get the same sugar rush or the high that we used to get before. So obviously we talked about the neurotoxic effects of glutamate. They're neuroaddictive too. The body just craves them more and more. And the nitrogen load, because the nitrogen cannot be excreted by the body, can cause chronic kidney disease, strokes, dementia. So these are the basic things about, tell me if I need to stop in the next few minutes.
Yeah, we're getting close to time.
Okay, so give me
A few more minutes, 5 minutes.
So we'll quickly kind of go over supplements. This is my last one. We'll keep it short. But anything, if it promises you the moon, it's probably not going to deliver. So if it sounds too good to be true, probably it's not going to be true. So weight loss miracle drugs, muscle building, sexual enhancement, depression, you name it. They claim all these things. It's very hard to be realistically achieving that with the supplements. The supplements, with the caveat that supplements are required in certain conditions. So if you have had gastric bypass surgery, you obviously do not have the rest of the ileum or the intestine, so you don't have the absorption of the vitamins and minerals, so you need them. If there is a strict vegan who does not do any animal products, they will lack B12, so they need B12. So similar, pregnant women will require supplements. People with osteoporosis, vitamin deficiency, totally. They should take supplements. But outside that, the practice of regularly taking one supplement a day to get the nutritional deficiencies that we might be having is probably not a good idea. The best way is to get it from fresh fruits and vegetables, what we call phytonutrients. Two vitamins especially, please do not take, please, do not take vitamin A supplement, any supplement that contains vitamin A, or any supplement that contains vitamin E. You can have all the fresh fruits and vegetables. These are the rich sources: broccoli, kale, avocados. you get butternut squash, beet germ. Please have all these natural sources. They are amazing sources to get all the nutrients, the vitamin A and E. Because A has recently been linked with osteoporosis and fracture, and the carotene has been linked with lung cancer. And they actually stopped two studies, the CAT study and the ATBC study, because people were getting lung cancer. It was not ethically possible to continue the studies anymore. But the other thing is vitamin E, which causes what we call hemorrhagic strokes, or strokes in brain, and risk of prostate cancer, even at a lower limit above the upper limit of normal. So please do not take these two vitamins. The rest are fine. I mean, if you have to take it, that's fine. But natural fruits and vegetables are probably the best way to get all the vitamins that we will be requiring. The problem with A and E are that both are fat soluble. They will accumulate in the liver. The body can get rid of it, as it would do with C or B vitamins. So B and C, even if you take too much, it's probably not a problem because the body pees it out in the urine. But A, D, E, and K, but more problems are seen with A and E, they cause issues. Reason for that is, when they make a vitamin A pill, you just concentrate a single molecule, like beta carotene. The natural carotene, which is a natural source of vitamin, it has alpha carotene, beta carotene, delta carotene, epsilon carotene, all these different molecules in synergy or right harmony. So they can the body can pick up a little bit of delta, a little bit of alpha, combine it together and use what it requires. But the marketing industry just picks one molecule and amplifies it 8,000 times and feeds it to us. Now the body doesn't know what to do with this isolated, chemically concentrated molecule. So there's lots of synergy or the harmony of absorption of these molecules. Obviously, as you can see, there's lots of titanium dioxide, dextrose, blue coloring agent and whatnot. I mean, with these vitamin pills, we are getting all this free stuff, which you don't want actually. So these artificial flavors, same problem with the sweeteners and preservatives, they're not good for us. So the take-home points, I will quickly go over this. As I said, if it has a shelf life longer than our life, please don't consume it. It's not the best bet for us. The take-home message from this lecture is, as much as you can eat organic fruits and vegetables, brightly colored. The more colors they have, the more flavonoids and all the phytonutrients that they're carrying. So they're naturally good sources. Avoid supplements, GMOs, and artificially sweetened beverages. The best is to plug and prepare. Harvest it from your kitchen and bring it, harvest it from the garden, prepare it in the kitchen, bring it to the table. Any last minute questions? All right, wonderful. Thanks.